In this episode, we shine a spotlight on the bold, genre-bending talents of Reeya Banerjee. With a voice that cuts through the noise and lyrics that speak to the soul, Reeya fuses rock, soul, and indie influences into something entirely her own. Whether you've been following her for a while or you're just discovering her now, get ready to be pulled into the world of Reeya Banerjee. Raw, real, and unapologetically powerful.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. We've got a very special episode for you. We're not going to waste too much time before we get to our guests, but if you're new to the show, thank you for checking us out. We appreciate it. In the back room, there's well over 200 episodes of music and movie goodness. You can go sort through. It's all browsing is free, so go check it out if you like. And if you want to support independent content creators like the 3324 podcast, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/3324 to help support us. That's buymeacoffee.com/3324. All the housekeeping is out of the way, and we're going to get right to our guests, Reeya Banerjee. Reeya, so glad to have you on the show. And so glad to meet you finally.
Yeah, glad to meet you too. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Reeya is a singer, songwriter, musician, an artist of multiple talents. And she's got a new album coming out, I believe, next month. Is it?
Next month. Yep. August 22nd.
August 22nd.
Drops. Yep.
And the album is called This Place. And there are 3 singles that are currently out, Misery of Place for the first time and Runner. So you can get a preview of those. We're going to link in the show notes to Reeya's website. We'll link to Spotify. We'll link to her Bandcamp so you can purchase her music. And we'll also link to YouTube so you can check out the video. So we're going to put a whole bunch of links in the show notes so you can just check out everything that Reeya has going on. Did I get it all right?
You got it all right. That was perfect.
Awesome. So let's start at the beginning, I guess, for me. And
okay.
Take us through when did you first start either songwriting or did you learn an instrument first? Where did all of this start?
Oh man, it depends on how you do the math. I started learning music when I was a child. I was in piano lessons as a kid when I was starting when I was 6 years old. I did not like the piano lessons. Piano wasn't really the instrument I wanted to be in. I always wanted to be a bass player. My mother was a big Beatles fan, and I loved Paul McCartney, and I wanted to be a bass player like Paul McCartney, and Paul was her favorite Beatle, and I was like, come on, this makes sense, right? But she really wanted me to go to Carnegie Hall, so there was a little tension there about that. And then I kind of stepped away from music lessons after a while. I learned music theory through the piano lessons, which I'm grateful for. That did come in handy later. But then I stopped taking piano lessons when I was 12. And then there was a long, almost 2-decade period where I didn't really do anything. And then right around when I was 27 or 28 years old, I had a really bad day at work. And I was like, screw it. And I went to a music store and I bought a bass. And I was like, I'm going to teach myself how to play the bass, and which is not as easy as I thought it would be, because 4 strings on a guitar is not the same as a bunch of keys on a keyboard. So I was like, oh no. And then I was living at the time in a little town in the Hudson Valley, Beacon, New York, where there's a huge artist scene, lots of singer-songwriters, musicians, writers, visual artists, photographers. Very artsy sort of place. And there was a music school there, Beacon Music Factory, and they offered like private music lessons for people of all ages. They also had this really cool program. They still do it. It's rock band boot camps. It's a little bit like School of Rock, but like for grown-ups. You can go there, sign up, and be a theme, or we're going to learn how to play this one album cover to cover, or we're going to do all of the music from Footloose, like we'll learn all the songs from Footloose, or all the songs from Dirty Dancing, or all the songs from the Blues Brothers, and like 12 weeks we would rehearse. Some people would sign. Basically, you become a little band. You have one of the instructors at the school kind of be the band leader. You learn how to play all the songs, and at the end of those 12 weeks, you get to do an actual show at a venue in Beacon. So that was how I actually got started with playing the bass with other people and being like in a band and those kind of band dynamics. And so it was sort of like getting kind of shunted into like the bar band scene where you come in, you're playing classic rock covers and, crowd pleasers and stuff like that. But I knew all of these original singer-songwriters in Beacon that I was friends with. We all kind of, rubbed elbows with each other and hung out. Met some of them were teachers at the school. And I always wanted to write original music. I didn't know how. I was always asking them, like, how do you do it? Like, how do you even start? And I've been a creative writer most of my life. So one of my friends, Jonathan Frith, he's a pretty prolific songwriter, kind of a folk music guy. And he was like, you're a writer already. You just have to do it. And I was like, what does that mean? And he was like, you just have to do it. And like, major imposter syndrome. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. It can't be that easy. I don't know. And then through mutual friends, I was put in touch with this guy, Luke Folger, who lives in Manhattan. He's my age. And I was talking to these friends. I was like, I want to write original music. I don't know how to write original music. And they were like, we know a musician in Manhattan from when we used to live there. Maybe we can put you two together and you two can collaborate because he writes original music of his own. And so that was the beginning of what is an ongoing creative partnership with Luke Folger. He helped me write my first record, The Way Up, which came out in 2022. And then This Place, which is coming out next month, he helped me write that one as well. And it was basically, the first album was a lot of, he's a composer. So he, comes up with the musical arrangements and ideas. And the first album was very much, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to spitball some ideas at you. This is some things that I'm thinking about that I want to write songs about. And here's some word vomit, like free verse, like, let's figure out how to make this into a song. And he was able to kind of take that and sculpt it into a record. And then after having done that, I was like, okay, I think I kind of understand how this works a little bit. And then I put out 2 singles in between the 2 records. And then we started working on the one that's coming out next month. And I've taken a more active role in writing the songs now that I feel like, okay, I'm comfortable. I know how to tell stories in song now, not just here's my word vomit, make it into poetry, Luke, so it's the new record. I'm insanely proud of it. I love the first record a lot, The Way Up. I'm very proud of that, but we wanted to level up, and that was our goal. That's why it took us 3 years between the 2 records, because we wanted to do it right. We didn't want to rush it out for the sake of like, let's put it out there just for the sake of immediately having something out there. We wanted to take our time and come up with something that was meaningful and that told a story. I'm very big on albums that you sit down and listen to end to end, which is not really how the music industry works anymore. But that's the way I like to tell stories. I think of it as a whole arc. I studied film in college. I kind of think of everything almost with the framework of like a storyboard. And I was like, well, I have a story I want to tell. And like, yeah, there's singles that can stand alone. We've been releasing singles along the way, but they're all part of a story. And if you sit down and listen to the album end to end, there's a story being told.
So it sounds like he was a conduit initially for you to kind of show you the pathway into writing music, because you had all the lyrics and he was able to facilitate those other parts of it. So at what point did you feel like, okay, I think my tuition, my tuition is over, or I feel comfortable enough to start to kind of take some of those.
That's a great question. I mean, I feel like with the second record, I had a very clear idea of what I wanted it to be from the start in terms of its structure. And then, he's a composer, so I do lean on him very heavily to create the music stuff. I can give him direction. Like, I would love this song to sound like a U2 song, or I would love this song to sound like he and I grew up with children of the 90s, power pop, post grunge, that era. I was like, I want the first song to sound like that Third Eye Blind song that was on the radio all the time when we were in 5th grade or whatever. Like I could give him kind of a direction. He'd be like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And then he'd kind of noodle around. He'd send me something. What does it sound like? I'd be like, okay, that's good, but can we tweak this? Can we, make the guitar sound more like this? And I think that drum isn't quite working. Maybe can we add some cowbell? Stuff like that. And then, kind of put together sort of like these little sonic, almost like notes. And then we kind of would try to figure out, okay, what is the song that goes with this? And then specifically this album, I didn't realize this until very late in the game, but Bruce Springsteen's Broadway show, where he did his sort of, his life story punctuated with songs from his catalog, There's something very similar. I didn't intentionally try to make Reeya Does Springsteen on Broadway, but I realized very late in the game, as I was writing the liner notes for the record, that that's kind of what I ended up doing. It's a story about all of the places that I've lived in my life. I've moved around a lot in my life, and just how they've shaped me and where they have taken me. And so every song corresponds with a place where I have lived, sometimes for many years, sometimes only for a brief amount of time. But there's a story to be told about that place and how it shaped me. And, just a core emotion or a core story I wanted to tell about that time. And so it's 9 songs about 9 locations. The second half of the album is very New York heavy. It kind of bounces all over the New York State. But the first half is, Washington, D.C., Chicago, San Francisco. That's where I grew up. And so it's just sort of like the journey of like childhood through, adulting, I guess. So that was my framework, and I came to Luke with that, and I was like, okay, there's going to be a song about DC, there's going to be a song about Chicago, there's going to be a song about San Francisco, but I don't want it to be like, here's the song about San Francisco, there's a Golden Gate Bridge, and there's fog, and it's, dreamy and hippies, like I want it to be about my, like what my life was like there, what emotions were happening to me while I was living there. That was the idea, not to be like, well, here's the Chicago song, there's the Sears Tower, or, here's the New York song, Statue of Liberty, it's like not to be a song about the city or about the place itself, but about who I was at that time when I was living there.
Yeah. So
yeah.
It sounds like the settings are just or the locations are more of a backdrop.
Exactly. Yep.
Or for where your emotions take place, or where these things take place. Just they happen to be in different places, but they're not necessarily the focal point of the song. But it's just that that kind of, I guess, helps to center your songwriting about it. Like when you're thinking about when you lived here or when you lived in San Francisco,
exactly,
about the park, but you're thinking about what emotions and what feelings you were going through at the time.
That's exactly it. Yep, that's it. That's exactly it. So yeah, it was. It feels ambitious in retrospect, but at the time I was like, it was almost like I was like a concept. I remember we were literally maybe 3 weeks after the first record came out, he emails me and goes, okay, what's the follow-up going to be about? And I was like, I already know. And I kind of presented him this idea, and he was like, whoa, okay, let's figure out how to do this well. And so it's been a labor of love. It's taken 3 years, but we wanted to do it right. We didn't want to half-ass it. So
stay with us. We'll be right back.
I want to tell you about Kale Your Idols, a new Hollywood podcast.
You might not know this, but the 70s are often considered the greatest decade in film history.
No, they know this. Everybody listening already knows about this.
Well, just in case they don't, this is the decade of The Godfather, Star Wars, Jaws, The Exorcist.
Dog Day Afternoon, Killer of Sheep, Shampoo. Are these movies over-discussed? Perhaps, but we're the only podcast that's doing a deep dive into this era.
Again, we're called Kale Your Idols. That's Kale as in Kael, named after the iconic film critic Pauline Kael.
Maybe these movies are extremely familiar to you.
Or maybe you haven't seen any 70s films.
Either way, check out Kale Your Idols.
Kael.
Are you sure we shouldn't change the name?
Yeah. Is it fair to say that the words came first, or were there melodies that came to you that evoked a certain place where you lived?
So with me, words always come first, and that's because prior to being a musician, I've always been a writer, so I'm always very word heavy. And this is where Luke comes in handy, so to speak, because he is a composer. So basically I could tell him, this is the story I want to tell about this location, and here's some ideas about what, like lyrically where I want to go with this. And then he would kind of pick up on that and be like, okay, this is what it's making me think of compositionally. So there's a lot of back and forth of like, I'm giving him an idea and some words and some lyrics, and he goes, okay, let me bounce that around in my head. And then he'll feed something back to me sonically, like a little, like here's 30 seconds of here's what this could sound like. And I'd thumbs up or thumbs down, or, hey, that sounds good, but maybe we twist it a little bit this way. So it's very much a back and forth where I look at it lyrically, like more on the word side, and then he takes my words, translates them sonically, sends it back to me. I listen to it sonically and go, okay, I like that. And then it might even impact what I do with the words. So it's very it's very back and forth. It's very it's very much a collaboration. I don't know if I could necessarily have done either record without him. I'm very I almost wish he was here, so he could he could tell you his side of the story. But yeah, he's very very much a part of it, and he produced both records. So he's I'm very very grateful to him because composition is still something that I am learning. I do have music theory, as I said, and I know how to play all these classic rock songs, and you have that kind of baseline understanding how music works. But I'm still learning how to put together, like, compose. Like that's something that I'm still learning how to do, and so that I need his guiding hand for that.
Okay.
So
You mentioned influences as far back as Paul McCartney up to and including 90s era grunge. I actually hear Foo Fighters on
I'm
Misery.
so happy.
I
I'm
hear
so happy you
on
say that.
Misery of Place. I hear Foo Fighters.
Love
Uh,
it. Yes, that's success. That means we did it. We did it right.
well, I hear a couple of there's a couple of other artists I hear on some of your other songs too. But how are your influences? Are they informing your songwriting, or are they more informing the music part? Or are you kind of do you have an audio kind of idea in your head that's informed by your influences, or when you're writing, is it kind of like, well, I'm going to try and go for this type of energy because your songs have uh, a particular energy to them, like
Yeah,
that I really dig. Like there's something. I don't want to call it. It's not forceful. There's an urgency and an energy to
yeah.
the way you sing. So are you thinking about that and your influences when you're writing, or is it kind of more, I have these lyrics and I'd like to point them in
That's a
this
great question. I mean, I think where it comes where it comes from in the totality of it is Luke and I were the same age, so we kind of came up again. I'm so glad to hear you say Foo Fighters because that's a touchstone for both of us. So that's the music that we grew up listening to. That's the music that we kind of have in our ears and embedded in our childhood. And because a lot of this album is very much me remembering my childhood, it's kind of was pulling back from those memories as well. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I was joking when I said I joking and not joking. I did at one point tell Luke, I want you to write a U2 song for me. But it's never like we sat down and said, this is going to be the song that's like the Foo Fighters ish song. This is going to be the song that's like the third, it's like those little snippets and ideas would come across as we were writing it. Like, oh, this kind of has a Foo Fighters vibe. Maybe we lean into that. Or, we were writing, this is not one of the singles, but the very first album on the record has this kind of like bouncy, peppy thing. And then I mentioned Third Eye Blind. I was like, I'm getting kind of like that semi-charmed kind of, is that the name of the song? Semi-charmed? Oh my God, it's been so long.
semi-charmed.
Semi-charmed kind of life. That's it. Yep. From Third Eye, the one that was on the radio all the time. So that, like we would kind of, like without realizing it, those influences would kind of come into the composition because that's just that's where we learned how to love popular music was during that era. But in terms of musicianship, Paul McCartney is my gold standard when it comes to bass playing, when it comes to, beautiful lyrical songwriting. I don't think anybody does that better than Bruce Springsteen. When it comes to like, you're talking about urgency and passion, I think of Bono and the way Bono sings. And I know Bono is polarizing for a lot of people, but his heart's in the right place, and he's a tremendous live performer. I've seen him,
Um,
and so it's like that's when I think about like who influences me, like musicianship wise and performance wise, I'm looking at kind of those older artists that were a big influence on me. Just growing up listening to those as well.
yeah,
I
and
hope that makes sense.
I always find it interesting when people talk about their influences, because one of the things that's interesting about it is everybody, five people might say that they're influenced by Bruce Springsteen, but their influences might come out in a different way because they're getting different things from him. So I always like to, when people say that they're influenced, when they're running it through their process, it comes out something that's going to be always unique and different because everybody takes different things away from pieces of music and what it means to them. So I always enjoy hearing people talk about their influences, and then listening just to, not to hear if they're a copy, but just to hear how people run it through their process and what comes out from it. And it's always something that's kind of a different, because you're adding yourself into it, and you're adding where you're coming from, and then you're amalgamating this whole thing, and that's what I love about the music that you make. Is that there's it's very hooky, and I'm a sucker for hooks.
That's good.
Like
I'm glad to hear. Okay, it's working.
no, I'm a sucker for a great hook, and your songs just have that. They have that thing that kind of grabs you, either a shift in tempo or just something that always kind of was keeping me engaged throughout listening to your album, and throughout listening to your singles.
Awesome. I love to hear that. Thank you. That's such. It's always a relief to hear people say that they like it, or they're listening to it. Even that's always the struggle of being an independent, unlabeled musician. You're like, is anyone even hearing, or am I just kind of like yelling into the wind right now? But so it's always
that's a great segue into this new way of recording. Where back in the day, everybody had recording contracts, and the studio would pay, and you'd go into the studio and cut the album. And nowadays, most people don't even need a studio. With the right equipment, you can pretty much self-record at home. That's one part of it. But now in this new digital age, how do you manage social media? How do you manage getting yourself out there? Because, if you're going to self-record, you got to self-promote as well, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it is hard, especially now. And I'll say, even in the time between the first record, The Way Up in 2022, and now, things have changed dramatically in the way, just the way people consume social media. Because that's really for people who don't have label backing and resources that way. It's really all about like putting yourself out there on social media. In 2022, we had a friend of ours, a friend of Luke's, kind of jumped in to help, kind of did some PR stuff on the side, and he kind of jumped in. He took over. I handed over the keys. I was like, you can have my Instagram and my Facebook for a few months and do whatever you need to do. And, he did what he could, but it's always tricky because you always kind of feel like you're selling yourself, and it feels a little gross. And then for this record, I ended up working with Ariel Hyatt, she has a PR firm called Cyber PR. She works exclusively with independent artists who don't have major label backing, because she wants to champion independent artists. And she really was the one who was like, yeah, in the 3 years since you put out your first record, things have changed so much because people have short attention spans, and you have to find a way to grab them and make them want to not flick up the screen and scroll to the next video, and it's you kind of it sounds gross, but everything is about content now. It's about everyone kind of has to become a content creator, and everything is content. Your music is content. Your life is content. Like she was like, you're gonna go on a run, take out your phone and be like, hey, I'm gonna go on a run, guys. Like, that's content. I'm like, oh, really? And she's like, yeah, people are into that because then they feel connected to you as a person. You're not just like, music promoting robot. You're a human being who happens to have other interests, but you also are putting out this record. She's like, that's how you get people interested in independent artists who, like, you have to kind of connect them on a more, almost a more intimate way. And the only way to do that is to maybe put more of yourself out there in a sort of casual way on social media. It's just a really tricky balance of like selling yourself, but being authentic, but creating content, but being mindful of the fact that people have a 3 to 5 second attention span. It's hard. It's really hard. Brave new world for me. And I'm still learning it as I go, but it's interesting. It's been an education. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think that the nature, you hit the nail right on the head. The nature of social media is that everything has to be clippable.
Yep, exactly.
You can do a 20-minute or a video, but you've got to find 45 seconds to a minute and a half of something that's going to grab somebody that you hope shows up in their reel or shows up on a short on YouTube. But I guess it replaces what the promotion that a label would do, where they would send artists out to the radio stations and all that. I mean, this is the new way. This is the new way of doing it.
Yeah.
I guess the goal
Absolutely.
is that independent artists are able to do that. They're
Yeah.
they're able to create those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody who can set up a Facebook account or an Instagram account can do it. I guess that's the big equalizer is that, we do have the ability to do it even on a shoestring budget or even with no budget or even just, like if you just have a plan. But the trick is, and like you're dealing with algorithms and you're dealing with, like you have to figure out like a huge part of what I did with Ariel before we even started promoting the album was like, what is your brand? Who is your, thinking about yourself as a brand is kind of weird, but like, you have to think about like, how are you presenting yourself and who is your target audience? My target audience is not Taylor Swift's fan base. That's not, they're not interested in what I have to, like what I'm trying to say or what I'm trying, and that's not to bag on them, but like we're doing a completely different thing,
Yep.
and so like my audience is probably more, I like the way I think about it is I write 90s kid music for grown-ups. So it's like my audience is like like the kids who grew up like me listening to that Third Eye Blind song that I keep forgetting the name of, or Foo Fighters or whatever. And, like my songs are sort of, what you're talking about, like, drawing from those references from the songs that I grew up listening to on the radio. And you weren't trying to make a retro album. Like it's not supposed to be like, oh, we're doing a retro ironic 90s revival thing. We're taking that and we're trying to carry that forward. Like, okay, this is the music that we loved. Luke and I, this is the music that we loved. And this is our version of it, sort of like kind of, through our lens and with the, like the hindsight and the age. And, like we're not the age that we were when we were listening to Foo Fighters for the first time, and so like kind of translating that and putting it out there into the world like that and figuring out who the target audience is for that kind of music. And that doesn't necessarily mean that my target audience is only people who were, born between the years of 1983 and 1992. It just means that it's people who have a sensibility and a taste for that style of music at any age. But, but that's figuring out that hook of like, what does that mean? And what is that demographic? And then tailoring your social media presence to kind of keep appealing to that audience. And that's tricky. That's really, really tricky it's tricky to identify and it's tricky to kind of keep it focused. And then there's a part of me that's just like, can't I just post cute videos of the cat? I mean, like that's what I would be doing if I wasn't promoting an album anyway. So, it's
I think
weird. It's very, very weird to think of yourself as a brand, but that's kind of what you have to do.
you definitely should post a cat.
I got plenty of cat videos. They're out there. I've got the cat. I've got the dog. There's a ton
Cat
of
videos are always popular. Cat videos are like.
I'll tell you something funny. I was trying to figure out YouTube Shorts, like kind of, because that's actually where you can get a lot of visibility. Because within Instagram and Facebook, you're kind of limited to who's following you, and then like maybe something will be shared, and then like somebody will discover you. YouTube, someone's at night scrolling through YouTube Shorts, they'll get fed anything, whatever they're interested in. Eventually, they might stumble upon something of yours and be like, "Hey, that's cool," and they go down your wormhole. So I just have been posting stuff on YouTube Shorts just to, like clips of our rehearsals or like behind the scenes of like us making one of the songs or like running vlogs or whatever. And the one video that I posted that got like 2,000 views within an hour was the one time I brought my dog down to the rehearsal space where my band rehearses, and we're sitting in the room. It was like the rehearsal before rehearsal. We were hanging out talking about what we were going to cover in the rehearsal. And Floyd, my dog, was there and he was barking and he was excited. 2,000 views in dog content. It wasn't even about the music. We were playing through one of the songs, but it was just the dog was there and the dog was cute. And I was like, all right, I've learned something about my fan base. More Floyd, maybe more Floyd and less running. I don't know.
You know what? Animals will always get views. So the new album is coming out next month. What is different about Reeya from this album to your previous album? What kind of growth have you seen, or were you intentionally trying to do something different from your previous album? You kind of said that. You kind of like, we want to kick it up a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
so that was something that was kind of underlying of just being really cognizant of what you had done previously.
Yes, yeah. So the first record, we wrote it during COVID lockdown, and we wrote it during a time when venues were, we didn't know if venues would ever open again.
Mm.
So we wrote it, and we wrote it like remotely, like it was a lot of emails and back and forth. That's kind of how Luke and I write in general now, but like our relationship was very like email and text based, and him sending me clips of stuff, and we wrote it not assuming that it would ever be played live. So it was a lot of like, the first album is like, there's a lot of like really quirky stuff and crunchy guitar chords and things that are like sort of very experimental and like out there and cool time signatures, because we're like, people are going to listen to this and enjoy it or not. And, you know, like, we're probably never going to play this live because people probably will never be allowed to be in a room with other people within 20 feet of each other ever again. And then just as the album came out in early 2022, venues started opening up, and we were like, oh boy, okay, maybe we should start thinking about whether we can play this live. And very hastily, I cobbled together a band. I grabbed some friends of mine from the Beacon days, and they had to learn how to play this music that Luke and I had written without intending for it to ever have been played live. And it was a lot of, you know, my buddy James, who plays lead guitar, he was like, okay, I'm trying to translate this. It's a very cool chord, but I don't actually know what key this is in. And Daria, who's my bass player, she was like, this bass line is cool, but I might have to tune my E string down to a C, and that might actually break the string. Do you want me to do that? I was like, no, move it somewhere else if you have to, you know. So it was a lot of translating that into something that was playable live. So when we did this record, the first thing we did was, let's write it assuming that we are going to be playing it live, number one. And then number two, definitely there is an evolution to where my headspace is between the first record and the second record. The first record I wrote, I had gone through a very, very severe mental health crisis in late 2019. And I was kind of coming out of that. I'd done a lot of therapy and was hospitalized for a night. And I did an intensive outpatient DBT program for 8 weeks. And it was very, very intensely, you know, like figuring out my life. And, you know, and that record kind of came out of that experience, just sort of making sense of what brought me to the low, you know, what brought me to the rock bottom. And it's literally called The Way Up. And then it's the way up out of that. And so it's very, very personal and very raw. And some of that stuff, I'll be honest with you, some of that, sometimes we go back and play that now, and I was like, I don't even know if I relate to this anymore because I just don't, not that I don't like it, but I was just like, it's very hard for me to put myself back in the headspace I was in when I wanted to put that song out there, because that's not really where I am anymore, which isn't to say that I've like 100% healed, because healing is linear and, you know, it's not, it comes in fits and starts and things, you know, things change, but I'm in a different place. But what I wanted to do with the new record almost was like, a big part of why I had that mental health crisis was, so I'm going to depress everybody for a while right now. My mother passed away when I was 12. She had cancer. She was sick. She was diagnosed with cancer when I was 4, battled off and on for 8 years. And then she passed away when I was 12. And my father meant well, but he never really gave me the tools or the resources to process that grief. He didn't either. This ended up impacting both of us a great deal in years later. And basically, you know, a lot of just, I was going through a lot of complicated stuff in my life in late 2018, early 2019, trauma with a psychotic landlord and, you know, work drama and stuff like that. And then, you know, when you're dealing with kind of like extraneous stresses, and then all of a sudden it was like, I was already in an emotionally fragile state. And that was when the unprocessed grief that I had never dealt with for 20 years started to poke out. And then it was like everything fell apart, just like completely. I was a basket case. And it's just completely, it's just when you stuff grief down for decades, and then it suddenly starts to, it pokes itself out just like in just why now? Okay, my landlord bullied me out of an apartment, and now I'm like, oh my god, my mom. Like it's very strange. But that's kind of how it, it's not uncommon what I learned when I, was doing the work to kind of come out of that. And so I've come through it. I'm in a different place. I'm in a more stable place. I feel better about, where I am, and, my relationship with my father and how he's processed grief. And so I kind of, the new record was a little bit about, like, if the first record is the mental health record, quote unquote, which is kind of how I think of it. This record is a little bit more about, like, well, here are the stories that led to me getting to that place where that first record happened. And then the story of what happened to me after I started to feel like I was on a path to healing. So it's kind of almost like a prequel and a sequel. But that was sort of that was one of the things that I use to frame it when I think about what the new record is. And then also, like, it's also kind of like a tribute to, I think about, it's funny, we were talking about how everybody interprets their inspirations differently, and people have a different take on what Bruce Springsteen is about or what the Beatles are about or whatever. And when I think of Bruce, he's a beautiful songwriter, but I also think about, like, the way he writes about Americana and the way he writes about, like, just where he's from, and just, like, where, the swamps of Jersey, and, like, just all the characters in his songs and stuff like that. And just he's very American, but not in a, like, jingoistic, patriotic, like, rah rah, America is an awesome way. It's more of like it's kind of a more soulful exploration of Americana. And so this is almost my attempt to do that, but I'm not Bruce Springsteen, and I live in New Jersey now. I didn't grow up in New Jersey. I have a very different life experience, but it's me trying to capture that same sort of, like, epic, grandiose, like, this is my Americana. This is my life as a person who's American, and this is my life story in these places. And so that's sort of the lens through which I'm looking at Bruce.
More the American experience.
Yep,
That's
exactly.
for him, and that, and from listening to the three songs, it kind of, your lyrics kind of sound like that, but personal to you. And that's what it is this is your American experience, like you said, not flag waving and Star Spangled Banner, but experience of being in America, where you've lived, and how that has informed your life, or helped heal, or
Exactly.
or other things. So I'm so looking forward to the rest of the
Oh, I'm
album.
so glad to hear that. Yeah, we've got one more single coming out actually at the end of July.
Okay.
And that's this I keep talking about. I told Luke, I want you to write a U2 song for me. That is the U2 song. And it is it's almost shamelessly a U2 song. When we got the instrumental demo, he sent me an instrumental demo for it. I was playing it, and my boyfriend kind of walked into the room, and he was like, "Which U2 album is this off of? I don't remember." And I was like, "Success, we did it right." That was exactly what I was hoping for. So, and I'm really looking forward to that single coming out. We did a really beautiful music video to go with it as well. So I'm looking forward to that coming out. And yeah, and then I'm looking forward to the whole album as well. I've been, I've been thinking about this album for 3 years, and I want everybody else to be thinking about it now. So that's the dream.
You've mentioned running,
Yes.
that you've done some reels about running. How
Yes.
did you get into running, and does running help with songwriting? Because I know when I run, it helps just unknot my brain, and thoughts come.
Yes.
So can you talk
Absolutely.
a little bit about when did you start running, or have you been running
So
for?
I went through kind of two running phases. One was like in my mid-20s, and that was when I was living in the Hudson Valley, but I was commuting to Manhattan for work. And I would come home from work. It was a brutal commute, and I would come back, and I'd just be like, I gotta just run just to get the blood pumping. I've been sitting on a train for an hour. So I lived near the Mid Hudson Bridge in Poughkeepsie. I'd run across the bridge and back. That was my first. Wasn't terribly serious. It was just kind of like a let me get my blood moving. And then many years later, 10 years later, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in late 2022. My entire family has it. My endocrinologist was like, your genes just came to get you. That's just, it was going to happen sooner or later. You staved it off for 20 years. Congratulations, but it's here. And, you know, I had to, in order to get my blood sugar, I was also very heavy. And she was like, you know, I'll, you know, put you on medication, obviously, but you got to make big lifestyle change. You got to change how you eat. You got to change how you move. You got to, you know, just make big changes, because that's, you know, medication isn't a silver bullet. And I remembered when I was trying to figure out, at the time I was living in upstate New York, in a kind of tiny corner of upstate New York that's almost closer to Vermont than anywhere else in New York. It's in the capital district, but like I called it almost Vermont, and I would tell people, where do you live? I live in almost Vermont. And so there wasn't like, the closest gym to me was 45 minutes away. It was a very bucolic little town. So I was like, what can I do to move? And then I was like, hey, I kind of used to like doing that running across the Mid Hudson Bridge thing. Maybe I should just start there. So I did Couch to 5K just to get back into it. And then somewhere, and then I just was like, okay, I did Couch to 5K. And then I was like, okay, and then there was like a program where you could like, Couch to 5K didn't actually get me to the point where I could run a 5K. I'll put that out there. It got me to the point where I could run for a half an hour without stopping. And then it was like, okay, let's see how much longer I can run for. And then became like, how much longer, how much faster? And then I was losing weight. As I was losing weight, oh, hey, I'm running faster. And somewhere along the way, running stopped being, okay, this is a thing I have to do to take care of my health, and actually something that I really looked forward to doing, because of what you said. It cleared my head. You get to be outside. You get to just sort of be in nature and just sort of, you know, like, just, you know, I've never really been like an outdoorsy person or a nature person, but I hate running on treadmills because you don't get that, like, you know, getting to be outside and trees and, you know, just like being in the world and feeling the air on your face. And so I got really, really good at it. We ended up moving down to Chattanooga briefly last year. We were down there for a year. My partner got a job down there, and Chattanooga is a really great town to be a runner. There's trails everywhere. There's my Siamese cat is being very vocal right now. I don't know if you can hear him, but he's got things to say. Anyway, you might not be able to hear him, but I can. He's got some opinions. And so Chattanooga is a great place to run because there's beautiful trails. You can run along the Tennessee River. There's another set of trails along the Chickamauga Creek, and just, you know, miles and miles and miles of just like land that is basically meant for hikers and runners and bikers and not cars. And so I got really, really good at running because it was just so beautiful to be out there doing it. And I got really good at it. And now I'm at a point where I can run a sub 35K, which is like my big, you know, like feather in my cap. As to whether it helps you with songwriting, it's funny that you say that. I can't run without listening to music. And so, because otherwise it's just, you know, it's almost like there's too much going on in my head. I need something to kind of focus on and maybe even run in time to. And then oftentimes, like, based on whatever winds I'm feeling, you know, whatever I put on Spotify before I start my run, you know, like sometimes I would get an idea of like, oh, I would really love to write a song that sounds like this particular arrangement of In Your Eyes by Peter Gabriel from this one live show he did in Athens in 1983. And then sometimes it would be things like last year we were finalizing the mixes for all of This Place, and Luke was doing these mixes and he was sending them to me. And he was like, give me notes, you know, what's working, what isn't working, send them, you know, like, and let me know. And what I would do is I would take the bounces that he'd send me, put them on my phone, and I would go for a run. And I would really hone in on the music while I was on my run. And it was a really great way for me to, like, I don't know what it was. It was the combination of the running and just the hyper focus. I would be able to be like, I could pick out like, okay, this is what's working. This is what isn't working. I'd love to hear more of this. I think we need to bring the drums up here and bring the bass up here. So I'd get back from my run and I would immediately sit down and I'd send him an email being like, okay, this is what I got from my 5 mile long run that I'm doing to train for my 10K in October. And he'd be like, okay, cool, interesting. That, but, yeah, there's something about, and then I also like other forms of exercise. Like if I'm weightlifting, I have to listen to music when I'm weightlifting. I started doing yoga because I was negligent about stretching before and after running, and I started showing signs of like adaptive muscle shortening. And I was like, well, that's not good. So I started doing yoga. I've never really been a yoga person because that's just it's just a little too the way yoga is often taught, especially because I grew up in the Bay Area, and the way yoga is taught in the Bay Area tends to be very kind of woo spiritual in a way that makes me uncomfortable. But I found these yoga classes where it's like you can do a half an hour of yoga and it's actually set to music. It's in time to music. And that was what got me like, okay, now I can do yoga because it almost feels like I'm dancing along to music. And then that clicked for me. And then doing yoga, all of a sudden I got really like my running improved immensely. Like I was able to shave a minute off of my mile time all of a sudden just because I was stretching. So yeah, like music and movement, like running and exercise are very, very entwined in my head as well. Um,
Do you,
so
do you recommend that people listen to your new album only while running?
oh, only while running.
Will
That's
that
a
be,
good
will that be the best? Will that be the best way, or will that be the best way to enjoy it while running? Since you got so much out of it when you were in the mixing phase, would
No, now that you're saying that, that might be the way to go. And I mean, and maybe maybe we can encourage more people to take up running. Hey, if you want to listen to my album, you should become a runner.
that's
Um, it
perfect,
is,
perfect
it
pace?
is a good, yep. It is a good album to run to. And I say that having listened to many iterations of the album last year while running. So
There you go. All right, as we close out,
yeah,
again, the album is coming out next month, August 25th,
22nd, August 22nd.
August 22nd, and it's called This Place. But I want to end with just some fun kind of questions that I always like to kind of throw at guests that I interview. Um, First question, I've got three questions, and each question has three answers.
Ooh, okay.
First question, three artists you would have liked to have seen live that are no longer around.
Oh, I would have loved to have seen Jimi Hendrix.
Okay.
I would have loved to have seen Sly and the Family Stone.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah, a little timely too. Yeah. And I think I would have loved to have seen the Kinks. I think they would have been a fun one to see
That
live. Yeah.
that's an eclectic trio.
Yes.
Very, very eclectic. Okay. Next question. You're going on a trip, but we live in the age where there's no streaming. You have to take physical media with you, either cassettes or CDs or whatever. What three albums are you taking with you on a trip when you're going?
I'm taking Revolver by the Beatles. I am taking So by Peter Gabriel. And I am what would be my third? I'm taking Joshua Tree by U2.
Ooh, nice.
I was Joshua Tree or Octoon Baby. If you ask me tomorrow, I might say Octoon Baby, but I'll say Joshua Tree
Yeah,
today.
I have a special affinity for Octung Baby. I just it was
It's
such a turning point for you two, where they were at the point of almost breaking up and needed to reconfigure and re-energize themselves. And Octung Baby is nothing like Rattle and Hum and nothing like
yeah,
Joshua Tree, and it was like a kind of a demarcation point for them. And I love that they needed to take that risk.
yeah,
It's like we
absolutely.
need to do this to survive because we can't keep doing the kind of music
Right.
that we're doing. And so for me, Octung Baby is like this really just uh, they were really great running up to it, and then just Octung Baby was just something totally different and just blew me away with it.
Absolutely.
All right,
Absolutely. Yeah.
final question. Here we go. Three things you regularly do before a gig, or three things that are superstitions that you do before a gig.
Okay. Here's the first one, and this is a holdover from high school. I was a theater kid in high school, and before every single performance, we would everybody in the cast every play that we did when I was in high school, we would gather in the dressing room before the performance, and we would listen to "Lose Yourself" by Eminem from the 8 Mile soundtrack, and that was what would get us hyped up to go on stage and do the show. And I still listen to that before every gig. I also listen to it before any job interview I go into. It's very useful for any sort of high stakes situation. It's just like the quintessential, like, you know, you gotta, this is your time, you gotta do it, kind of song. I genuinely really like Eminem too. I think he's a very gifted lyricist as well. It probably sounds very out of left field when I'm talking about all these other artists that I'm influenced by, but I think he's a very, very good writer. So that's one of my pre-show rituals, maybe even a superstition, because if I don't do it, I feel like I might not do very well. Another pre-show ritual I do is I sing "Won't Get Fooled Again" by The Who in the car when I'm driving to the gig, because it's actually a very good warm-up song. I don't do the big scream at the end because I don't want to blow out my voice, but it's a good warm-up song because, again, it takes me, Roger Daltrey's voice is, so it kind of takes me everywhere I need to go vocally. And then the third thing I will do before a gig is, it's funny. There was a time when I would say I would do a shot of whiskey. And ever since the diabetes, I don't really do that kind of thing anymore. So it wouldn't be a shot of whiskey. It might be, it might be something more like one of those wine spritzer seltzer, not a Mike's Hard Lemonade, but they make classier versions of that. Something to get me a little loose, but not like sloppy. So that would be
Cool. I think you've handled those three questions with absolutely flying colors.
awesome.
So,
Good to hear.
Reeya Banerjee, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your music, your influences, and running as well, because that's important. I've been to road races where they play "Lose Yourself" at the beginning before the race starts, so that's not uncommon. It's not like psych up thing.
That was when I ran my first 10K last fall. I listened to it before starting that race as well. Yeah.
It's very, very apropos. As I said in the beginning, we're going to put a whole bunch of links in the show notes to Reeya's website, Spotify, so you can check out the music, YouTube, so you can see the visuals, and more importantly, Bandcamp, so you can purchase her music and support independent musicians. It is so important. And that's actually going to be the first link that you see in the show notes. So the album is called "This Place." It'll be out on August 22nd. There are 3 singles out, and there's one more that's going to be dropped. And she's telling us that U2-esque, perhaps.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. U2E, U2 adjacent.
U2 I like that better. U2 adjacent. Kind of
adjacent.
Along the same lines as them. Not as much as what is that? John Mayer did that "Heartbreak Warfare."
Oh yeah.
Basically, like U2. What was that? I think it was "Bad," or I don't know what song he got the riff. Like he took the riff and just like, okay, this is like a U2. But I think he said, yeah, this was absolutely me doing a U2 homage.
Yeah.
So it's all good. It's music is just great, and I like I said, hearing different people's takes on it and how people filter their influences is really where the magic is, and that's where the artist shows. You said just briefly earlier, you said, well, we're not doing retro stuff and we're not doing like a ripoff of it. It's the process. You're processing those influences and something unique and entirely yours and original comes out. So we urge everybody, go check it out. All the links will be there. Reeya Banerjee, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me. This is a fun conversation. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you liked it. So again, you can check us out. New episodes come out every Thursday on your favorite podcast provider. If you follow us, you don't have to do anything. You'll just get a notification. It'll be real easy. We won't even bother you. Maybe give you a light tap on the shoulder occasionally to remind you. But otherwise, if you follow us, it's all taken care of. So for Reeya, this has been Dean. We will catch you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.